Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to our module 4, which is social engineering attacks. It is module 4 of the Cisco's ethical hacker course. Promises to be quite interesting. One of the things that we don't take for granted each time we engage such kind of modules is to try to give a definition. Right? And definition puts a lot of things in perspective. The moment you give a definition, it aligns the mind of the learners or your audience to the objective you are trying to communicate. And once that happens, it helps them now begin to pick each communication from that point on and put them in the proper places in their mind. So social engineering is a big thing, very huge. For it's huge, and the interesting part of it is that a lot of people don't even think that they are being socially engineered until it happens. You know, it's just like where somebody engages you in a line of questioning with the intent of getting some facts or some details from you. That's like in a nutshell what it's supposed to be, right? Now, I'll attempt to give some definition, and then, as always, I'll do that at the beginning of each class. Give a definition, then attempt to put everything in perspective with regards to the components that are contained in each chapter. Then we'll dive into the slides and see how it goes. So, with respect to attempting to explain social engineering, I would say that it is more or less um, a technique of manipulation, right? Simply put, there's no other way to put it. Any other English from that point is trying to paint trying to avoid the elephant in the room, right? An elephant is too large to ignore in a room. So if it's in a room and you're saying nobody's talking about it, it just suggests that you are just trying to play the ostrich, right? So it is a technique, right? It is part of the things that attackers or we say threat actors use, and the focus is to actually deceive you into thinking that the person is who they claim they are. But then there's an intent behind that particular deceit, right? Or the deception. The intent is to be able to gain a lot of details regarding a particular object or target. And in this case, the object or target would be perhaps an application, an infrastructure, or the network itself. Okay, so social engineering would be considered a technique of manipulation, and it harps on human psychology, right? It takes advantage of it, it exploits human psychology. Why? To gain access to information, system, or physical location. Now, this access they are trying to gain is not authorized. So we can say that it attempts to gain unauthorized access, right? Now, every person talks about hacking, when you look at, say, for example, what we can call the traditional hacking technique, right? There are lots of things that are used, which are usually like tools. These tools play on the interaction that computers have or devices have in any network, right? And the that backdrop of the interaction that they have becomes the base on which most of the tools for hacking work, right? I said something, and I keep saying it, the architecture, the structure of the network or internet, as the case may be, is built around a device hosting services and another device making requests for those services. So when you join a network as a client, as a user, the focus or the goal would be to enjoy services that are offered by someone. And to engage these services or enjoy them, there's a need to satisfy the protocols or the rules that govern how these particular services should be used or enjoyed. And so these protocols ensure that whatever the services are, right, and there are quite a number of them, these services are categorized into well-known services, registered services, and then dynamic services, right? And from that place, we give them certain openings that lead to the services, which are the ports. So we have well-known ports. These ports are gates or doors that lead to the services. So whoever you are, if you're a client or a device giving service, you must adhere to the service, to the protocol. So if you are a device who is serving those services, then you only respond to services requested of you if the requester or requestor adheres to the rules, which is the protocol. So typically, hackers take advantage of the conversation that exists between the requesting guy and the giving person. is either they spoof or mimic the behavior of a genuine asking person, or they hijack the serving guy, that's the server, and then, of course, deny other people the access to those services. So, but social engineering is completely different. This is where, apart from the devices themselves, right, there is an activity that happens with the people who use the services, the humans that use the services, right? So often, right, it involves deceiving individuals to divulging confidential information, right? Or even what's it called now? Deceiving them into going further to perform actions that compromise security, which is usually the biggest side. Okay, so giving out information, maybe somebody's been properly educated or trained on the job, and so he may not or she may not be giving out certain information, because typically there's a way someone begins to ask a question. You know this person is attempting to get a particular fact or detail which is not supposed to be meant for general public. But see, the other side of social engineering is where you are deceived into performing certain actions. Click, perhaps, right? Download, perhaps, you know, go to certain site, perhaps, open a certain file, perhaps. Well, you do that and there seems to be no challenge, no problem. But then you've activated a particular activity. For those of us who watched the video I played from last week's this week actually, Sunday's class, there was a video we played about 3 minutes 48 seconds thereabout of some guy who played a lot of role in compromising the system, right? So social engineering is a thing, is a huge thing. Okay, so it's not the traditional hacking technique, right? Because the traditional hacking technique relies on technical exploit. Of course, traditional hacking technique also relies on social engineering, but social engineering as itself, right, involves deceiving an individual. And the traditional hacking technique is simply, like I said earlier, taking advantage of the conversations that occur between the client and the server, or the requesting guy and giving guy. And the components of social engineering are quite a lot. Well, give or take, reconnaissance is one of it, which is intelligence gathering, social engineering, where you collect information about the target, and the target could be an individual, an organization, whatever. But then could be also be a particular service, a particular software, as it were, right? You can also do research, right? You go ahead and use very normal tools like Google, for example, social media accounts like LinkedIn, for example. A lot of people just are very cool at dumping things there. I could also use some sites, or a particular, after you've put your resume up on LinkedIn, I'm able to perhaps, bait you by letting you understand, hey, you know what? From your profile so far, I think you fit, the profile of who we're looking for. Hey, how about click on this and check our site? And if you click on the link, perhaps nothing really happened, physically that you can see, but then it's perhaps deployed some exploits that's compromised the system, waiting for a CNC device to handle it. Right. So information gathering is one of the components of social engineering. There is also phishing. Phishing is spelled PHI. SHING is it's like fishing, like FI, like going to catch fish, where you send fraudulent communications through emails or text, or even do phone calls. And that way you disguise as a legitimate source, and the focus is to trick the individual into receiving that call and also exposing sensitive information. There are quite a number of types of phishing. There's spear phishing. There's what's it called now? There's vishing for voice. There's smishing, SMS, and a number of them. These are all part of social engineering, right? There's baiting as well. Baiting is when you use false promises to lure individuals. Okay. There's also the impersonation, where you adopt a fake identity, right? Assuming you're somebody in the organization, you just use some other person's information, or well, you use something that looks like an information approved for the organization, or that particular entity or the community, right? You can occur online, right? Which at some point There was a country in West Africa that was known for it, and they would say like that, like this, I'm a son of a very rich man. The government didn't like my father. My father died. The estate is left for me. All I need is to move the money, and then bait someone. Then there's also what we call quid pro quo, or what we say something for something, right? Typically, you offer someone technical support in exchange for login credentials, right? Sorry, somebody's asking a question. No, I'm not yet. As always, as always, I lay the foundation before we begin. So I'm doing how do I put it now? An introduction of the topic, doing like a summary, not like a summary, giving an idea of what, yeah. So once I begin, it will start being shared. Thank you for pointing out that. So please note, every time class starts, you would see the topic and I'll attempt to explain them before we get into the slides itself or themselves, right? Then there's also pretexting. Pretexting is being able to perhaps fabricate a scenario or a story, and why you're doing that is to be able to gain the person's trust, right? You're pretending to be, let's say, a tech support guy, right? If there's some guys I follow on Facebook, on social media, Facebook and the likes, and also I think TikTok as well. They are hackers, but they hack hackers. They usually bait these hackers. Assume that like there's some 60-year-old guys attempting to reach their benefits and they're having a problem. So they drop links there. And these other guys who are domiciled in a particular part of the world are always looking for these rich, people who have some work benefits stored up somewhere and they want to just get access. So these guys can just come up and cook up a story. Hi, good morning. They send you a mail. If they get your mail, they send you a mail, tech support, maybe xyz.com. We notice that your mail has been acting very funny with respect to your money that is stored in FCMB Bank or FHQ Bank. We're hoping that you didn't give information to somebody. I'm calling from the bank and blah, blah, blah. And they have your details, right? Have your details and it checks. So pretexting, that's how it works. They cook up a story, fabricate a story, and the focus is to they appear legitimate, attempt to appear legitimate. And then, there was a time when it happened in our country when some people will call you and say, hello, good morning. How are you? You say, fine. I'm calling from, let's say, Bluebird Bank. Okay, how may I help you? You have an account with Bluebird Bank? You say, yeah, I do. Okay, I'm calling on regard to the CBN. Your account is about to be deactivated because of BVN, something, something, something. And then if you are not aware, they got some number of people, right, before the information went out, and then people becoming more aware. People became more aware of how to deal with them. Then there's tailgating. Tailgating is where you physically follow unauthorized personnel into so when you are an unauthorized person, but you physically follow them into environments that require people should log in. I say this every now and then that uh pretexting and smishing. So pretexting is I can call you, right? It's a call, could be a text, but then there's a story in pretexting. Smishing is a text message that I sent. I'll send you a text, which is typically like what happened in just shortly after the elections were won. You get a text message from somebody saying you have been selected, that the president or the particular party, right, XYZ party is considered, observed, you've considered that you so and so and so call this person to collect your 75,000 naira. That's smishing. Pretexting is where I can sit down and write a script. It could be a very long thing. So pretexting could include smishing. But pretexting is generally creating a scenario, right? Leading, it may even border around something that was in the news. Something that perhaps, let's say, for example, there was a time when, I think not so long ago, federal civil servants were asked to move to do a registration with IPPIS, and a lot of people waited for a long time because they were not sure. Now, pretexting that's pretexting, where they can tell you, hey, there's an information right now, we're gathering details, perhaps about your remuneration details, and if you don't do it in 5 days, blah, blah, blah. I cited an example the last time about how pretexting can work. I didn't call it pretexting though. We now have a new Minister of Education. Somebody could take advantage of that. And knowing that the Minister of Education might want to address his ministry, somebody could just go ahead and find out what his email address looks like. And they may change a character inside, right? It happened sometime with GTB, GT Bank, the BA. The A was not GT Bank's A. It just changed it, but the color and everything was the same. It had the same outlook. And they sent mails to people that had accounts with GT Bank. Some guys were got, So the difference between pretexting and smishing is simply that in pretexting, there's the story, there's the scenario. And the focus of the story is to gain your trust. So that it always appears legitimate. Now, smishing is a text message. Typically, that's what you get. You get a text message, saying that's SMS phishing. That's what smishing is, right? So smishing falls under phishing. Phishing normally is a communication, is a fraudulent communication, right? Outrightly. Where pretexting is pretending, right? To assume a context that exists with the hope of gaining your trust. So that's the difference. Did that communicate well? It scored a point. All right. So great. Yeah, great. So there's psychological manipulation. There's reverse social engineering. You're welcome, bro. So reverse social engineering is when you create a problem, right? And then you position yourself as a solution provider. Remember that reverse engineering typically. If you and somebody are having quarrel, the person is the one that created the trouble, though, but they will switch the table so that you now begin to feel bad that you are the person. That's typically what reverse social engineering is. Normally, the person who is doing the social engineering approach would manipulate the target so that you reach out for help. They know that let's assume that it's email, for example. Okay, let's put it this way. You work in a place where you guys have network. So I can come into the place and create a problem. There's no network. Then I'll put a number, contact support, right? And then when you call support, of course, it might be diverted somewhere. So you get the call, hello, good morning. Who am I hearing from? So you place the call. So it's not like we called you. You understand? So that's reverse engineering. So there's quite a number of them, but let me not waste too much time. Let's dive into the slides and see what our slides have. Another thing that is very important, that worthy of mention, is the fact that every social engineer always attempts to create a way out so that the tracks are not found. And so that's why usually we advise people to, as much as possible, educate your staffers, right? Very important, because once they are educated, it allows for them to have a knowledge that prevents them being susceptible to these things. Every now and then, there's October just rounded up. There's never too much information about what is expected to be done. So training, retraining, and training, and skilling, reskilling, upskilling, very important as far as these things are concerned. Now, this aspect, of course, a great number of time, it doesn't have to do with the tools doing the attack themselves. There is a human being who has studied the environment, right, and then uses that environment to exploit a target. So let's dive into it and let's see what we have for today. Okay, is my slide moving? Yeah, okay. All right. So we're looking at explaining how social engineering attacks succeed. We're looking at pretexting for an approach and impersonation, social engineering attacks, physical attacks, social engineering tools, and then methods of influence. So we're going to attempt to look at all of those today. The next chapter after that will be exploiting wired and wireless networks. And it will be good if you don't have an exposure or knowledge of what networks are like, which of course I don't doubt that some people actually like the idea of ethical hacking or cybersecurity, but don't have the base of networking. It's going to, at some point, we're going to have some challenge, especially when we get to module 5, module 6, and module 7, right? It's going to get a little challenging. So what you may want to do is to begin to get some of those courses on the Cisco site. Since you have an account now, just read up on them, or perhaps just do some small reading. It will give you a good knowledge base. So let's dive into it. Looking at pretexting for an approach and impersonation, right? Part of all of the components that I discussed earlier. Now, social engineering attacks attacks against the weakest link. What that suggests is not so it's not about the person. I don't know how to put this so that the person doesn't feel bad, right? When we say weakest link, is with respect to what is expected of the organization as far as your assets are concerned. Remember that anybody attacking your network or attacking, or attempting to gain access to your environment, your resources, your infrastructure, has something that is looking for. And everybody in that place who works with you must be trained or exposed to training that helps them to understand the scope of why they are working there. So it is normally attacks against the weakest link, which is the human element that is in your network that lacks the knowledge about some of these attacks. And these attacks are like phishing, vishing, farming, spear phishing, whaling, and others. Now, there are other social engineering techniques such as elicitation, interrogation, and impersonation. Now, elicitation is the act of gaining knowledge or information from people. How does that happen? You, you walk with the person, right? You're not asking the person, no, but you're walking around the person. Some people do this, they can just decide to say something wrong. They know exactly what is right, or perhaps they have an idea, you know, and then I'm sure you've sat with some people who are very driven to the point where they'll tell you, look, let me tell you, I even know this person. See, his house is here. You see this house, see this house? Now the person get the house, right? That's elicitation. It's the act of gaining knowledge or information from people. In most cases, an attacker gets information from a victim without directly asking for that particular information. What he does is that he just urges you towards what he knows would irk you, something that would just make you feel like this person is talking. Let me tell you, you don't know anything. This is what is. This is what is. By doing that, they're exposed. You can tell them, network, recently, we've been using archaic routers. Say, come on there. We just got a router 2 weeks ago. The person has that information. How can you say you got router? Is it not Airtel router people have been using? No, we're using Cisco router. I have information. I didn't ask you, but I've gotten it. It's largely psychological. So interrogation is how an attacker interacts with the victim for the success of a social engineering campaign. The interrogator can use any information the target revealed to continue to gather additional information or to obtain information from another victim. So typically, how interrogation works, right? Is just asking question and querying. If you want to understand interrogation, just be around 5-year-olds, right? Those children who are between 5 to 8, when they interrogate you, they'll ask you, who is your grandfather? So did you grow in the village? And everything you are saying, they keep it until the next time you say something contrary to but daddy or uncle, I thought you said so and so, right? So typically it's just gathering information from anybody, and any information that is revealed is for the purpose of continued, digging. Impersonation is when an attacker presents as someone else in order to gain access to information. Social engineers may use pretexting to impersonate individuals in certain jobs and roles, even if they do not have experience in those jobs or roles. So let's put it this way. Remember, this is very common, especially this time of the year. A lot of people, this happened somewhere where I reside. Some people came into some guy's house and they said that they were NEPA. They were PHC guys, PHC staff, and they were going around checking whether people had done what they call tampering, which is where people, add an additional line or bypass the meter to be able to get power. And they just met a little girl in the house. And of course, since they said there was PHC and the girl just chilled. That's how the people came into the house, just knew that they did that for that week. They came the first week, first day, the second day they skipped it, they came the second day. By the third day, which was like a Friday, they walked into the house, they cleaned the house, cleaned everything in the house. So what they did in the first time was just reconnaissance. They were gathering intel. Okay. This happens also within a network environment. And please note, we're saying this happens to normal houses, normal places, normal environment. But let's imagine that house where where the person attempting to gather information about is perhaps where this network infrastructure are hosted or are kept, right? So typically they just go ahead and pretend. Now there's another one that could also begin to happen. They may come and tell you that, like in the city where I live, the Metropolitan Board is doing some form of enumeration. Some guys can just walk into the place, hang some ID card. You can look like the original staff of that particular board and walk into the place and tell you, want to see the place. They are normally enumerating the place. So you need to stand. Typically, tell them, sorry, there's nobody that can I see some ID card? Who's your supervisor? All of this kind of stuff. So typically, impersonation happens that way. Farming is a type of impersonation attack in which a threat actor redirects a victim from a valid source, right, to a malicious environment. And this valid source could be website. So we have tools, right, like your Wireshark. Typically, Wireshark keeps track of conversations that happen between, a client and a server that is attempting to get stuff from. So sometimes you see some redirection happening. That's why we always advise people to not go to these free sites, right? If you are purchasing stuff or downloading stuff, because you notice if you click on a particular thing what you want to download, they'll bring you Bet Niger or bring you some other kind of thing. So typically that's farming, right? So they just redirect you from a valid website, right, or a valid resource to where they make it appear like it's a valid one. I heard that there was a time recently where some people created a site for buy power, right? So people who go online to buy power, electricity power, units were redirected somewhere and they were wiped because, of course, you must put in your card and all. So from there, an attempt is made to extract confidential information like information about your credit cards, right, or debit card. We use, well, yeah, ATM cards. So this is the trick to this. I'll just throw it in here. I advise people to have one card because since you cannot stop using or purchasing stuff online, have just one card. Never credit it. The card